Welcome to the All In Kosciusko podcast. I'm your host, Matt Duell, and today I'm joined by Peggy Friday, CEO of KEDCO. We're fresh off the Global Entrepreneurship Congress in Indianapolis, a powerful gathering that reminded us how much potential is pulsing beneath the surface in Kosciusko County. But today we want to have an honest conversation, not just about potential, but about the friction that often comes with progress. Why is change so hard, and why is it so necessary for our community to thrive? Peggy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. So grateful to have you and for you to give the time to be here. So today's show is going to be a little bit unique. What we're going to do is we had the opportunity at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress to sit down and capture a bunch of interviews with different people who attended that conference. And so we're going to share some clips from that. But one of the primary reasons you're here is the overriding theme of those conversations were just ideas around economic development, change, progress, those sort of things. So thought it would be great to just have you come in and share a little bit and help us unpack some of those thoughts. But before we get started and before we get into those GEC interview clips, would love for you just to take a moment to catch up our listeners on who you are, what is KEDCO, a snapshot of what you all are doing in the community.
Absolutely. Well, KEDCO, or the Kosciusko Economic Development Corporation, exists to provide economic development services all throughout Kosciusko County. And that means the small communities as well as the larger ones like Warsaw and the town of Winona Lake. We provide a myriad of services to help the community grow. We get up every morning and our mission is really to bring opportunities and wealth to Kosciusko County. And we do that in a number of ways. Attraction of projects is one of the key drivers of KEDCO. And most recent wins, obviously, Slate Auto. We're excited to welcome them to the community.
Yes.
And the latest announcement with AutoCamp,
right,
building a brand new facility along the Route US 30 corridor. So business attraction is important, but equally, if not even more important, is business retention. We want to make sure that the businesses that are here and that have employed people who invest in our community, who are very benevolent and generous, we want to make sure that they have everything that they need to survive and succeed and to stay here. So business attraction is important. Attainable housing, those two projects alone are going to bring the opportunity for 2,000 jobs. Now, we know that not everyone will live here, but the goal eventually is to provide attainable housing so that they can have options to stay all throughout the county.
Yes.
So we're really blessed with being able to partner with some strategic partners across Northeast Indiana to make sure that attainable housing is a goal. We've talked with at least 7 communities and have at least 2 or 3 projects in attainable housing that are actually taking shape and moving quickly. Our job is to help identify land and work with those landowners and those communities that want to grow as far as housing goes. So that's pretty exciting. You mentioned the GEC. Part of what we do is innovation and entrepreneurship. And just being able to be at that conference is a huge benefit, and we'll talk about that later. But just excited to be a part of that conference. And infrastructure is important. Marketing is something that we do all throughout the county, the small communities, again, as well as the larger ones. And so being able to be at a conference like that helps us to market all in. And then everything that KEDCO has to offer. We offer networking opportunities, just a myriad of economic development services that I think has been missing here in the community. And I don't think people really understand how many hours it takes to land a project like Slate.
Oh my goodness.
That wasn't 1 or 2 phone calls or 1 or 2 meetings. That was hundreds of hours combined.
It wasn't like they drove by and saw a for sale sign on the property.
Right.
Yes.
And said, I'm in. So
yes.
There's a lot of work that goes into these projects. And what I want people to really understand, I think, most about KEDCO is that if we bring a project to a community or to the county, it's a project that we have vetted. We have every confidence that it would be a good fit for the county. And we just hope that people will gain some trust in what we're doing, and know that we won't bring projects that aren't a strategic and intentional fit.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I appreciate you saying that, and kicking us off with that snapshot and that heartbeat. And because let's be honest, we know that right now we are living in a time where trust is very low. You know, when we talk about trust in our elected officials and trust in our community leaders and business leaders, there is just that angst and that tension. And so part of this entire platform is that opportunity to open up and have very honest, open conversations about things.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the foundation for the All In brand. When those conversations are hard, we just all need to come to the table. And at the end of the day, we just want to do what's best for the community.
Yes. I love that. Well, as we mentioned, we both had the opportunity to attend the Global Entrepreneurship Congress down at the Convention Center in Indianapolis with a number of other folks from the county. And just for our listeners' perspective, this was a conference where there were about 3,000 people that attended with a really strong focus around entrepreneurship, 200 countries represented in the audience there. And so just an amazing time for us to interact with the participants, to hear some really big ideas from all over the globe, other communities, things that other people are doing, for us to network and share what we were doing. And we had a really special opportunity that All In Kosciusko was one of the featured brands of this particular gathering. So as you think about that time, why does it matter for us to be there? Why take our county down and have representation at something like that?
Well, we are the orthopedic capital of the world. So we are already working on a global level in providing services and products all throughout the world, with orthopedics. But it's not just orthopedics, it's also agriculture. When you look at how we export, whether it's eggs or ducks or chickens, we're feeding the world. And so we're already on that global stage. So we need to continue to market the All In Kosciusko brand and be able to reach and get out of the office and get out there and meet people. And that was a very unique situation. Obviously, it's probably not going to be held in the United States, in our lifetime. It's been only 2 times that conference has been in the United States. And so being able to showcase Kosciusko County in a small, intimate setting, because, our logo, that All In Kosciusko logo, was right next to the other platinum sponsors, which included Meta, IEDC, Indiana University, and the Lilly Foundation. And to be in that caliber and, next to those brands and see that all throughout that conference was really important. And I think one of the benefits of being able to showcase All In, it was proof that we are collaborative, because the people that manned the booth, that came down and spent their time, from Grace College, from OrthoWorks, from Priority Medical, those folks came down and worked that booth, shook hands, met people from all over the world. And if there was a question, whether it was orthopedic related or education or manufacturing, there was someone in that booth that could immediately answer that question. And so I think that was really important. And I think it was important for all of us to work together to get out of the office and showcase all of the great things that are happening in Kosciusko County.
Yes,
absolutely. And that bonding period, I think, was great.
No, I couldn't agree more. And, I loved the networking that we had with people that came to the booth, like you said. And we just heard a lot of, wait, you all are from one community, and yet here you've got business leaders like Zimmer, Biomet, and Plug and Play.
Sure.
And, then we've got, your team from KEDCO, we've got OrthoWorks, and just everyone's collaborating. And that definitely was something that left an impression. And then I think for me, just enjoying the extended time with those teams. Because like you said at the beginning, your team is focused on what's best for the community. And I think that extended time to get to know you and your team and just see the heartbeat in the work that you do is really, really special. Well, Speaking of people who noticed the momentum and the collaboration, I had a chance to talk to Stefan Frisia, who is the president and CEO of the Northeast Indiana Regional Partnership. And he is over an 11-county area that includes Kosciusko County and some of the regional development that happens there. And he talked to me about a lot of the momentum he sees in the area. And he specifically mentioned some of the exciting things and changes he's seen in Kosciusko County the last couple of months. Let's take a listen.
And in the last, now almost 4 years, I've seen a lot of change, a lot of momentum that began, years, in advance. Long-term thinking about what the region should be doing, looking for ways to better itself. Kosciusko is one of them, I would say. Warsaw specific with the orthopedic industry. Over the last, couple of years, tremendous amount of change. When I first got here, I felt like there was a little bit of a cloud over the county, over the city, a little depressed. There were uncertainty in the marketplace. Was right on the heaves of COVID. So industry was still trying to grapple with the supply chain disruptions, and then there were changes in leadership also on the larger companies. People were nervous, but over the last 18 months, I've seen coming from, that little, I don't know what's going to happen, to excitement, excitement about what the community is going to do, how they're going to carry the industry for the state, the possibilities, and, companies that thought, so maybe we should go somewhere else, they're doubling down.
Okay, so Peggy, how would you describe this particular moment in Kosciusko County's growth? What stands out to you right now?
Just the opportunities and the resources that are available. A lot of communities don't have resources to invest in our community. We'll talk a little bit later about the ORI, or the Orthopedic Industry Retention Initiative.
Yes.
Grace College's Catalyst Corridor Grant. There's a lot of momentum. And I think it goes without saying that all of this didn't happen in a bubble. It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
There's been a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings with leaders all across Kosciusko County with the same focus and the same purpose, and that is to bring growth to Kosciusko County. And so I think we're building on that momentum. All of those meetings, those early Friday morning meetings where the leaders just visioned what our community could look like, how these resources could be best deployed. And out of that came the All in Kosciusko brand. And I think the collaboration, I can't speak enough of the collaboration. If we didn't have that, I don't think we would be in this place at this time, being able to help the community grow. It's a perfect storm.
Yes.
And it's been really fun to watch how blessed this community is, again, in resources and people who really care, who are really vested, kind of can come to the table and take off their work hat and put on the hat of what's best for Kosciusko County and how can we all work together. So that collaboration, I think, has led us to the blessings that we see in being able to have the resources to invest in the future. And I think that Kosciusko County, the city of Warsaw, is going to look completely different in 3 to 5 years because of that investment and that just that work that people have put into the future.
Yes. But like you said before, it's not always about just the new projects, right? It is about that retention side. And so through the work that you and your team are doing and the folks at OrthoWorks and others, we've seen an exciting commitment from our friends at Zimmer Biomet. So have had the opportunity to speak with Ivan Tornos, the chairman, CEO, and president of Zimmer Biomet. And he spoke about his optimism for what's happening in the county. And as the county's largest employer, they're continuing to make decisions to invest and reinvest here in Kosciusko County. Let's take a listen.
If you're going to do orthopedic manufacturing, you want to do it in a place like Warsaw, Indiana. Kosciusko, as the Polish pronounce the county. We have 100 years of manufacturing expertise. We have best-in-class manufacturing practices. We got the know-how. We got great infrastructure, technology. We got access to education. So it's in the bucket of the tangibles or the hardcore elements of the answer. On the softer side of things, it's hard to find a community with the values of Warsaw, Indiana. I grew up in a small community. I'm from Madrid, Spain, but I grew up in a small community, first in Spain and then in North Carolina. And you want to be in a place where you have the values that we have in Warsaw, Indiana, the faith, the family centricity. We're in the business, I tell people, we're in the business of doing good for others, and you need to find good people to execute on that mission. I think it's a great time to be in Warsaw, Indiana, and in the county. We continue to add jobs. We continue to invest. We've done north of $300 million of capital investments. We're going to be more than an orthopedic company, and this is very exciting for the community. As you probably know, 1 of every 4 residents of the county work for Zimmer Biomet. So that's going to get amplified. We already had the partnership with Plug and Play to bring additional sources of innovation in medtech. So again, being more than an orthopedic company, and we're just getting started. Over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to do significant work when it comes to innovation, both organic and inorganically. And I think this brings excitement to the community. So I would say very optimistic.
Okay, Peggy, so there's been a lot of talk about momentum. You mentioned it a moment ago, of just a lot of excitement, things that are happening. We have the ORI funds that came in at $30 million to help retain our orthopedic industry. We have the $27 million through Grace's Catalyst Corridor, which is a large community investment. From your perspective, what are some of the real indicators that this isn't just hype, this isn't a flash in the pan, but there's some real sustainable things happening here?
Absolutely. And we're building on the past. There's been a lot of work done over the years with a lot of different organizations and various studies that has proved that Kosciusko County is a great place to invest. You know, I'm thinking about the HELP program, the Hoosier Enduring Legacy program that Amy Rowe and the county are working with our small communities to let them know that they are relevant and they are important in the growth. The Brookings Institute study that talked about the growth along the corridors. You know, we haven't mentioned the redevelopment of Winona Avenue. You know, that is something that has always been in the background. But I think because of the timing of those 2 grants that you talked about, we're going to start to see the reality of Winona Avenue develop. The partnership with Ball State University that's studying that corridor, as well as studying the future of the orthopedic industry and the supply chain, whether we're ready for the future, working with the city of Warsaw and the town of Winona Lake to build that corridor and those 2 gateways into both of those communities, and how that corridor can be an international corridor. It already is, but how can we improve the infrastructure, the walkability, the lighting, all of those things that are of a concern for the businesses that are on Winona Avenue. So that is another project that I think is I know is a result of those two initiatives and funding sources that you talked about, because the funds are there and they're set aside for that community. All of the history that many organizations have done in those studies is now becoming a reality. And it's just really exciting to see and be a part of it.
Right. So can we lean in a little bit on the Winona Avenue corridor, just a little bit, because it's something we haven't talked about a whole lot yet. Is it fair to say that what we're looking at there is a facelift, is a reinvigoration of that actual road? I mean, how would you describe that a little bit more in detail?
It is. It's the connection, obviously, between the city of Warsaw and the town of Winona Lake and Grace College. And we know that the city, when they purchased the Warsaw Chemical plant, that will eventually be a business and innovation center, as well as Grace is also building their business and innovation center on their campus. So there's going to be a lot of activity and a lot of opportunities to attract new businesses into those buildings. But we know that the infrastructure along Winona Avenue is aging. The walkability is difficult with the school nearby and those students having to cross that busy, it's a truck route.
Yes.
So there's some safety concerns along Winona Avenue, and as well as just maybe possibly working with NIPSCO in burying some of those utilities as they're upgrading the services to that area.
Yes.
I know that Jeremy Skinner at the City of Warsaw is seeking some pre-development or pre-engineering firms that can kind of take a look at it and come up with a plan on how that should be developed. Now, we know it won't be cheap, so it'll need to be done in phases. But I think the community is going to start to see that facelift.
Yes.
And it's really important that the businesses along that corridor have a say, too, in how that's developed and what that becomes. I know through meetings with our KLA team, that was our white paper project, was the redevelopment of Winona Avenue. Talking with those business owners, they want to be involved. They want to see the communities invest in upgrading, again, infrastructure, sidewalks, bike paths, and then be able to maybe give a facelift, curb appeal to some of those businesses, and then attract businesses that would be a complement. With the KEDCO project, close by, there's going to be some residential growth in that area and some commercial. So it's just really time for the redevelopment of Winona Avenue to become a priority.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, and that perfectly sets up our next clip. We had the opportunity to speak with President and CEO of Crossroads, Vince Wong. And Vince had just some incredible thoughts on what it means to lean into growth and evolving as a community. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around a lot of communities, and I would say folks in Kosciusko County, we tend to be humble Hoosiers. And not willing to toot our own horn, but the community and the assets, both culturally and nature and professionally, are really, really wonderful.
With that, people don't always naturally like change. Change can be a hard thing, and yet leaning into change provides that road for progress in the next generation. What would your encouragement be, just thinking along those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think unless we're evolving and changing, then we end up, kind of like a plant. You end up kind of, curling up and dying. And so it's really important for any healthy community to continue to nurture and invest in itself and evolve into different, even better iterations of itself. So that's what will kind of help guarantee future generations of having the great quality of life that the previous generations have enjoyed.
What a powerful statement from Vince to think about that unless we're evolving or changing, like a plant on a vine that's not being cared for, it can wither and die. And certainly that is not what we want for our community. So let's turn the conversation to something that I know can be a little bit tough to talk about, and that's the data center. There were some real concerns on both sides of that conversation. And yet from an economic development standpoint, that was a tough loss for the community. So as you think about that, what do you feel like we learned from that experience? What would you love for the community to understand about that?
Well, Vince was absolutely right. If a community isn't growing, it's dying. And data centers, there's a lot of myths and a lot of misconceptions around data centers. And I think what I would like to do and what KEDCO is planning to do is to have a conversation community-wide, starting with the leaders who make decisions on these projects, to share the facts of data centers. There's a lot of fear about data centers. Is it going to cause medical issues if I live near a data center? Are they noisy? Are they going to deplete the watershed? Are they going to do what they say they're going to do? There have been, honestly, some failed data centers, but the newer projects going forward, I mean, we're a data-driven society.
Yes.
And having that infrastructure here in Kosciusko County would be an incredible win for our businesses, for our schools, for our families. Farmers use data in their tractors, with the GPS. And so we're using data, whether it's on our phones, whether it's in our machinery and our equipment, we're using that data every day. And they're putting data centers all over the country in strategic places. They can't just build one, in an empty cornfield. You have to have the infrastructure to support it. We're fortunate in Kosciusko County that we have some of the best locations for data centers, but we have to get through that fear of and misconception of data centers. And Google isn't the answer. What is the answer are sitting down with the folks that are involved and having that frank conversation to help us get away from some of those myths.
Sure.
The loss of the data center in Leesburg was a tough one because we didn't get the opportunity to share with the community what the benefits are, answer questions, and get them engaged.
Yeah.
When we start these projects, we sign non-disclosure agreements or NDAs. And those NDAs are legally binding that we won't discuss publicly a project until we get the go-ahead from the project user.
Yeah.
And in this case, there just wasn't time
to
be able to start that process.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do in the future is when a tough, controversial project comes, we need to just sit down as a community, as elected officials, and learn the facts.
Yeah.
When we look back at that data center and the fact that it was such a large project, the financial impact to the community was immeasurable. We talk about the cuts with SB1 and things going on in the state. We don't know, from an education perspective, what we're going to get from the federal government always. But to have that safety net of a user coming into our community that is investing, the amount of money that data centers invest in nonprofits is astounding. And just with this particular project being in RAMC's territory, they are bound by law as to what they can make as far as revenue each year. And so anything above that gets invested back in the community.
Wow.
And, we had representatives from KRAMC come and talk to the KEDCO board to educate them and Wabash Power about the true facts of data centers and what we lost in Leesburg. And it was jaw-dropping. And at some point, if that project would have gone through, KRAMC would have had to lower rates.
So lowering what community members are paying,
exactly,
their rates go down.
Exactly.
Wow.
And the investment in infrastructure, again, that fiber, that internet connection that we all want quickly, we have to have the infrastructure here. And I'm a little bit concerned, we're the orthopedic capital, and a lot of the cohorts that are coming out of plug and play are tech driven.
Yes.
And so we have got to have that infrastructure if we are going to continue to be the orthopedic capital and evolve into the orthopedic med tech space.
Yes, right.
Important.
Yes, as we hear from leaders like Ivan and Vince and others who are saying, we don't want to just be orthopedic companies. We do want to take that next step into being the med tech capital of the world. So that infrastructure you're talking about is critical for that.
And it's not just orthopedics. It benefits agriculture. It benefits our students. Being able to provide opportunities for students coming out of high school and community college to be able to have the opportunity for high-paying tech jobs. And the one thing that we as a community need to learn is that we can't base a current data center project on what's happened in the past in other communities. Okay, data's not going anywhere. Innovation isn't going to go anywhere. And, there's been a lot of propaganda coming out of China. And I know this is a bit controversial, but there's a lot of propaganda against data centers that's out there on the internet, easy to find, because they don't want the United States to grow and to become very, very technology driven and have that infrastructure here. So we've got to be really careful when we're looking at projects that we base our opinion on looking at the facts and gathering those rather than going to the internet and haphazardly finding, I can find anything that'll support my position, but it may not necessarily be the truth.
Yes, absolutely. And we know these can be hard conversations, and there's emotion tied up into it, especially when you're thinking about things like legacy and the things that this community has been built on, agriculture being such a huge part of it. So with respect to all of those things, we know it's a hard conversation, but let's be committed to being neighbors and leaning in together and wrestling through that.
Right. And that's what didn't happen. And so that's our goal at KEDCO, is to bring those partners and stakeholders to the table so that we have those hard conversations and we hear the truth about a project. I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does.
Sure.
And so we can't say that this project is going to fail because past projects have.
Yes.
We've got to look at every project, look at the merits of that project, and then decide whether or not, it's a good fit. And we have such a rich history in agriculture. The problem with data centers too are, where are they going to go? Typically, it's going to be farmland. And so we have to be real strategic. If the power is there, if the water is there, if the infrastructure and getting in and out, during construction is there, then we need to take a hard look at, whether or not we can, give up that farmland in order to help the community at large be progressive.
Right.
We have such a rich history in the ag community with Shoretime Brock. Maple Leaf is 3 generations, Creighton as well. So there's such rich history here in agriculture, and KEDCO is not. Well, KEDCO is very. We care about the farmland that's here. We're not out, trying to leverage all of these properties. But strategically looking at ones that make sense and providing the opportunity to the landowner, to the community at large, for growth opportunity.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for walking through that and helping unpack that a little bit. One of the exciting things is on the heels of the data center and some of the disappointment there. The announcement of Slate Auto, and then, like you said, very recently, AutoCam coming to the tech park and making a $70 million investment in a new building there. Some really exciting projects, some things that are significant. Slate Auto coming in with, what are they saying right now, about 1,800 jobs? Between
1,700 and 1,800. There's also the opportunity for suppliers coming from the Detroit area that I know that there'll be a couple of them under roof. They'll be employing people. Slate is we're just blessed because Slate could have landed anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
But they chose Warsaw. And I think the story is the LSC Donnelly plant closed permanently at the end of 23.
Okay.
And within less than a year, there was a user for that facility. Because we know it's aging. There's some issues that Slate is resolving in just improving that facility.
Wow.
And there's been some talk, well, EV isn't for me, or, other EV companies haven't made it. We've got to give Slate a chance. They're investing millions of dollars into that campus to repurpose that building that otherwise would have sat empty. And, I just am very proud of the KEDCO team. I'm very proud of the county. They worked really hard alongside Slate and KEDCO in the abatement process.
Sure.
They were brought into those conversations early on and just understood the value of bringing job opportunities to our community. I know that there's a lot of people who are looking for employment. And we would like the people that are driving out of Kosciusko County into other counties for employment to have great opportunities right here.
Yes.
And kids coming out of high school and Ivy Tech, going into the trades. This is a very innovative product. I mean, it was funny because we went to GEC and people from around the world knew about Slate Auto.
Yes.
They had heard about that opportunity. And it's going to create jobs.
Yes.
It's going to create a lot of wealth for the community at large. They're very giving.
Yes.
They want to invest in the community, but also the other businesses in town, the locals that will service that company. We've got to think about that. We need to think about,
sure.
Tourism.
Yes.
Jeep has its festival. Why can't we have a Slate Auto Festival once we get going and attract people to Kosciusko County? It benefits our hotels, our restaurants, the construction people that are there right now that are staying in our hotels. It's the impact throughout the county as far as economic wealth is concerned is immeasurable.
Yes. A lot of dollars being poured into local businesses,
Absolutely.
A lot of tax dollars that are going to stay here in the county. And then what strikes me, and I know I've heard many people say they're excited about, is the diversity this brings to our industry landscape.
Absolutely.
We love our orthopedic med tech partners. We love our ag partners and the businesses and the history and the culture that's there. But with Slate, it's like we're getting another leg on the stool, so to speak.
We are. This manufacturing isn't done anywhere else in the world. And so we have the opportunity, again, on a worldwide global stage, to say advanced manufacturing happens in Kosciusko County. And hopefully that will attract other large opportunities. And again, we know that there will be suppliers who also want to move here. We've gotten calls at KEDCO about helping them find locations. Those are additional jobs. And so we hope that through this Slate process, people will have the opportunity to stay in our county to work. And I heard something really unique. I was in a meeting last week, and one of the orthopedic industry leaders here was talking about how he and his 12-year-old son, his son was just mesmerized by this whole Slate product and how they've put in their reservation for a vehicle and how they're going to work together to DIY this vehicle. Just a really fun story about how, we can engage as families when a new opportunity arises.
Yes, I know we're eager on the Warsaw School sides of things to connect with them into our Career Center because, again, just another pathway that we can offer our students, another opportunity for them to grow in their journey.
Yeah. And, ultimately we love our kids, when they go off to college, but we love for them to come back.
Absolutely.
And we need to expose our talent that's here that, hey, consider Kosciusko County, as well as the kids that aren't going to college and are going into the trades. It's a great opportunity. And we're excited for AutoCam. to be here, the investment that they're making, the 300 employees. I've heard that just in that very short announcement, they have more resumes than they have job opportunities.
Wow.
So far.
Wow.
So there is an appetite for work here in our county, and there seems to be a strong workforce.
Yes.
These companies do their homework, and they know that the workforce is here.
Yeah.
We also work with Ivy Tech. We'll getting these employees trained on exactly what Slate is needing is pretty exciting to engage with our young people.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, we have a clip from our good friend Susie Light, who spent many years with the Community Foundation, learning just the financing and the side of people giving generously, investing in the community. But then she jumped into working with KEDCO and you all, and just she shares what she learned about economic development and what it means for these companies that come to town. And then she shares a really fascinating story from her hometown of Mentone and an opportunity that was missed out on. Let's take a listen.
So what I learned at the Community Foundation was that donors, typically business owners, wanted to give back to the community, and philanthropically they invested funds to help do things like support scholarships, support parks in our community, support wonderful community amenities. When I retired and went to work to help KEDCO, what I learned is how critical economic development is. Those business owners were part of the economic development environment in Kosciusko County. So KEDCO has celebrated its 41st anniversary. Thank heaven for Deb Wiggins, who started our Kosciusko Economic Development Corporation, and the people who have carried that torch forward and looking at how do we recruit businesses? How do we retain businesses? How do we help entrepreneurs grow a business in Kosciusko County? Because that benefits all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So unpack that a little bit. Talk about, when you say benefit all of us, what does that mean to the day-to-day community member?
So what it means is a business comes in and employs people. Those people pay income taxes. Most likely, they're going to be paying property taxes because they'll live in our community. Those taxes help the government do the things that they need to do to make our community the great place it is to live. But they also businesses contribute to little leagues, to the YMCA, to other entities in our community that help the quality of life in our community.
Make it a great place to live.
They make it a great place to live. So those property tax dollars support things like our great school system. It is the circle of life.
I love that. Well, with that though, there's just a natural thing that happens of when companies are coming in, that's going to initiate change inside of a community, right? And most of us don't like change. Change can be hard, but again, from what you've learned, why would you encourage us to lean into maybe a little bit of discomfort, thinking about the long-term effect?
Okay, so there's this really good book called Change or Die. And it talks about how things change over time. And if we don't embrace those changes, we end up becoming stagnant. Now think about a pool of water. A pool of water has life in it. If something happens and it becomes stagnant, it's toxic to everybody. It dies. I don't want our community to do that. I want our community to be thriving. That's why economic development is important.
Yeah, I love that. So Susie, you're originally from Mentone.
Yes.
And you told me a story one time that I thought really captured this really well. Would you mind sharing that?
I do. Every time I go back to Mentone for a visit, it feels like I'm going home. And I learned Lawrence Bell, there's a library in Mentone called the Bell Library. Well, that's named for Lawrence Bell, who grew up in Mentone. Lawrence Bell went on to develop Bell Laboratories. And you know the Bell helicopter, right? So Bell Helicopters had an opportunity to build a plant in Mentone. Back in the early 50s, 60s. And they were told no. They wanted that area because it was on a rail system. It was on a highway. It was a great labor force in the area, but they were told no. Now just imagine what would have happened to our community if a wonderful Bell helicopter factory were here, how it would have changed the face of Mentone and Kosciusko County. We're a great manufacturing facility.
Yes.
And we missed it
Yes.
because people didn't want change.
Okay, so Peggy, we've heard from community members that when things happen quickly, and for our listeners, I'm putting that in air quotes because I don't think many of these things actually happen very quickly, it can create some frustration. How do you approach these conversations about change being necessary, even when it's uncomfortable?
Absolutely. You know, economic development is not a race, it's a marathon. And we could spend hours and hundreds of hours on a project and lose it to another community that's competing, that maybe has more incentives, has a stronger workforce. So again, you know, we're legally bound when we sign those NDAs that we assign project names to these various projects and not talk about them publicly. And that's a tough thing because people start to think that, you know, maybe KEDCO is a secret society or, you know, we're hiding things or we're keeping secrets. But it's so important because you can lose a project midstream because word gets out. You know, some of these companies that are maybe moving from another location, consolidating and putting a new facility here, they have employees in other areas that don't know that that's in the works. And so if we start to talk about that, you know, it becomes problematic. You can lose a project over that. We could legally be sued. You know, by the company that we sign the NDA with, if we divulge information ahead of time. You know, if they're working with landowners and securing property, and we talk about a project publicly, the price of that property just went up. So we have to be just really careful and really mindful that when we sign those NDAs, as hard as it is, we have to keep our word. That's all we have at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, is our honesty and our word. And so if that is paramount to everything that we do, and it's difficult because we sometimes take hits because, you know, we aren't talking about these projects in public or the right people aren't engaged. And so I just want people to understand the economic development process is not easy. It's lengthy.
Sure.
You know, it was a 10-month, hundreds of hours in helping to bring Slate here, in working with the county and their abatement committee. And, you know, some that means that some people on the county knew and some people didn't.
Right.
And that's a tough call.
Sure.
You know, unfortunately, we can't bring everyone to the table at once because that's not how economic development is done.
Yeah.
And so there has to be that level of trust with the community, but also with the company. And we don't want that reputation that Kosciusko County is not a good place to do business.
Yes.
So we have to be careful, and we will definitely learn from past projects. We will engage the community as early as possible so that the elected officials who are making the decisions are well informed, and so are their constituents.
Yes.
Because they hear from their constituents. And we've got to be careful that we're listening to all of our constituents and not just a small portion that might be against a project.
Sure. Well, and I can absolutely speak to your integrity and the team's integrity. And I have told people, hey, if you've got a secret to hold, Peggy Friday is your person. You let her know, and she's going to, you know, keep that thing under lock and key. Because again, we're partners in communicating and we're helping out on the marketing side of things. And I have come to you and your team and I've said, hey, can we get information on, and you've said no. You've looked me right in the eye and said no. And again, I've so appreciated that about you because it's always shown me how seriously you've taken these projects. And key people sitting around the table sometimes have to sit in the dark and be patient and wait. And so truly, I didn't know about Slate until Slate was announced publicly. And again, I applaud you because I can't imagine how difficult it is to have people pressing in and just saying, well, just between you and me, or, just don't mention it. And you don't do that. And you've trained your team not to do that. And it's impressive.
We've had those hard calls.
Yeah.
From high level community leaders that have said, hey, what can you tell me? And we stuck to the talking points that Slate gave us, because again, at the end of the day, all we have is our integrity. Yeah. And even with that Slate announcement, it did not go as planned. Once they had that launch out in California, and a tech-savvy reporter saw the picture of LSC, put two and two together, and very proud of my team for handling that, with Slate, because we were getting barraged by, media, national media,
sure,
regional media wanting that story, but it wasn't ours to tell yet. And I had promised, as you and I have had those conversations, I've promised our local media that as soon as we could announce Slate, they would be the first.
Yes.
And so, we really had to pivot. And when we had to do an interview, out of Fort Wayne with the permission of Slate and some talking points, we called our locals and said, you got 5 minutes to get over here, because we've got to do this,
yes,
with Slate's blessing. And so just really proud of the KEDCO team for keeping that level of confidentiality and then pivoting when things did not go as planned.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, thank you for giving us a little bit of the behind the scenes on that. And hopefully we can continue to build that trust that there are great things happening, even things that are behind the scenes, things that are going to take a little while, but it's going to be exciting news for our community when it comes out. And hey, I'm really excited because pretty soon we are going to have a conversation, a little bit deeper conversation with Slate, yes, that we'll be able to share with others. So excited for that to come up.
And we are with Slate planning a celebration here at the end of August, because I think it's really important. They were able to announce in California, that Slate was coming somewhere in the world. But we want a celebration here. We want to bring the world to Kosciusko County to help celebrate the fact that, this is big for the state of Indiana. Indiana was at the table, in the very beginning, and was able to help incentivize this project, because really without the county and the state incentives, we were competing with another state in the South who were throwing incentives at the project. So the state of Indiana, this is big for them. When that announcement was made that Slate was coming here, the Governor Holcomb at the time was ecstatic, because this particular project put the state of Indiana over its all-time attraction investment.
Wow.
So we're just really excited to be the location.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So cool. So cool. All right. Well, we have one more clip from our GEC interviews that we want to share. Luke White, who is the managing member and executive president of Priority Medical, shares a little bit of his story. Someone who was raised on a farm and had experiences in agriculture, who then transitioned into manufacturing and working in an orthopedic field. Just give some great thoughts on legacy and what are the things that we're building and what do we want to leave behind for generations to come. Take a listen.
I think all the way back to my origin in the agriculture space, right? So I grew up on a farm, I grew up working on a farm. I got all the tractor fixing weld burns and scars to prove it. I've got scars on my hands from, putting implements back together. And I think we need to start looking at how much value does the agriculture space bring, because it's massive. Then I think about, a lot of my family and myself included spent a lot of time in manufacturing. And, there's a rich legacy in manufacturing in this area. So even if you took away all of the big brands, right? If you took away everything that is recognizable around the world, there's those two things, you can't take them away. You know, what is going to elevate and lift up those, you know, those intrinsic valuable industries, and what else are we adding to them to continue to elevate them? Are we, you know, what other sectors do we need to invite in that are complementary? What other technologies and innovations does our region need access to in order to enhance those? How do we stand on the shoulders of giants? We got to figure out what we're going to champion. You know, we need to decide what are we going to leave when we're done? Obviously, I'm a little bit younger, so I kind of have a hill to look over. But what are we going to leave behind? And what is that? Is it going to be transcendent? And is it going to pass on generation to generation to generation? Or are we going to do something that's limited?
Okay, so Peggy, what does it look like for us to expand, grow, evolve as a community while still honoring the incredible legacy that built this county?
You know, in some of those clips, you know, they talked about the history of orthopedics and how all of that started and how generous those community leaders were and how the orthopedic industry involved. But we have a legacy within agriculture as well.
Yes.
You know, the Creighton family in their legacy of providing, you know, eggs to the world.
Yes, celebrating 100 years this year.
Exactly. Congratulations to that family. Shoretime Brock and how, you know, they have evolved over the generations to serve the ag community. And then, you know, the Maple Leaf, 3 generations and growing of families. We value at KEDCO that incredible legacy, whether it's orthopedics, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's agriculture. We want to build upon that. We don't want to forget where we came from, for certain. And, you know, just I applaud these communities for staying here. So we have a rich legacy. And as we grow, we want to be mindful that the businesses and projects that we bring in complement that legacy.
Yes.
And then be mindful of the future and how things are evolving. And just making sure that, you know, we don't forget where we came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Stefan, in our interview, he had another soundbite, and I'm just going to say it. He said, who will be the next 3 people? And he was talking about Kosciusko County, and you mentioned our orthopedic history. And what he was talking about was Reverend Depew, Justin Zimmer, Dane Miller. And so his question is, he's looking in at Kosciusko County and all in Kosciusko is, who steps up? Who are the next 3 people? Those 3 people made a massive difference. Who are the next 3 people? And again, to me, that's the heart of what All in Kosciusko is about, is just growing together, paving the road towards an exciting future. For you, what legacy do you hope that we build for the next generation here?
I think the legacy is intentional, strategic growth. And that we somehow start to involve our young people and our talent in helping us make those decisions. OrthoWorks is doing tremendous work with middle school students, you know, all the way up through high school. And I think it's time to start bringing some of those ideas and some of those students to the table, because, you know, what happens when this group of leaders who have done an incredible job envisioning what happens and led to the All in Kosciusko brand, who's next to sit in those seats? I think we need to start grooming young people in opportunities in manufacturing, orthopedics, ag, you know, recreation. We've not talked about the huge investment Pollywood has made in Syracuse.
Yes.
And being able to bring our young people to the table so that when those seats need to be filled, in starting to vision what Kosciusko County looks like 10, 20, 30 years down the road, we have that same momentum and those leaders that are at the table and saying, here's how I think we need to grow, envisioning and taking risks, planning the future of a county of 83,000 people isn't an easy task.
Right.
And I'm just grateful to be able to be at the table with these leaders, and hoping that, there are generations to follow that say, hey, I want to be in government. Or, you and I were talking down at GEC about a student who is passionate about growth.
Yes.
And following what's going on at KEDCO and following what's going on at economic development, and to just hear his enthusiasm and his wanting at, a young age to get involved. And so I think we need to identify those young people that are potential leaders and start to engage them early.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I love that. And quick shout out to my friend Ethan and his many ideas for economic development. And you're right, when we think about that, it's just that who's that next person to step up into these roles, and what can we do to empower them? And
I've heard, some of Ethan's ideas, and he's reached out to KEDCO, and just to think that a young person gets it, understands. Those are the valuable, we call them intellectual assets.
Yes.
Those
right.
We've got to be mindful as we grow and find these projects and have these opportunities, that we identify the intellectual property that'll be the next generation to lead.
Retaining talent, people that we want to stay here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Good. So good. Well, Peggy, thank you so much. Thank you for your time here today, and just being generous with your thoughts. And more than that, thank you to you and your team for the incredible work that you all are doing through KEDCO.
We get up every day and are just truly blessed to be able to be in this community and to serve. And that's what KEDCO is all about. It's about service. And, we want to service everyone. And that includes, the constituent and the residents that live here. If you have questions, if you have concerns, comments, call us, stop in. We'd love to engage with the community. And we're strategically trying to create opportunities where we do just that.
Excellent. That's great. Well, if you've been listening and you're feeling inspired, that's the point. We believe Kosciusko County has what it takes, not just to grow, but to thrive. But thriving takes all of us. So if you're a resident, a business owner, a student, or a dreamer, this is your invitation. Be curious, ask questions, show up, and speak into what's happening in our community. You can stay connected with the All in Kosciusko movement by following us on social media and subscribing to this podcast. Just search All in Kosciusko wherever you listen. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it. Send it to a neighbor, a colleague, or someone who you think should be part of the conversation. Thanks for tuning in. We're just getting started, and we're so glad that you're all in. We'll see you next time.